They thought they'd push me out, with a single text message and a casual thumbs-up emoji from my own aunt. What they didn't know, I held the key to their entire financial world, and I was about to drop it. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm 32 years old, and last month, my entire family decided I wasn't worth keeping around. The message popped up in our family group chat. We think it's best you step away for now. A dismissal, a public shunning, and then the ultimate betrayal. My aunt reacted with a thumbs-up emoji, just a casual, digital nod of approval to my exclusion. I stayed at it. That little yellow icon burned into my brain. My reply was short, sharp, and laced with a cold resolve they wouldn't understand until much, much later. Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family fund, too. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I quietly closed my contribution to our family's shared wealth. At 2:15 a.m., my phone started buzzing. By sunrise, I had 89 missed calls. My dad's voicemail, frantic, demanded, "What happened?" The bank flagged everything. My response was simple, chillingly calm. "I'm honoring your decision." They had no idea. Not yet. They didn't realize I had everything else. See, the Millers weren't just some family from Boston. We were The Millers. Our name carried weight in financial circles across all of New England. Our family business, Miller Financial Advisors, had been running for 3 generations. My grandfather built it from nothing after the war. I grew up watching my father, Robert Miller, expand that legacy. Our 5-bedroom colonial in Brookline was a monument to success. Expensive art, imported furniture, framed photos with politicians and celebrities. My mother, Diana, was the picture of a corporate wife, hosting elegant dinner parties where million-dollar deals were sealed over slices of a famous apple pie. From a young age, I had a knack for numbers that surprised everyone. While my cousins played with toys, I was devouring my father's stock reports. By 10, I was asking questions about market trends that even my dad sometimes struggled to answer. This created an uncomfortable dynamic, a subtle resentment that would follow me into adulthood. I graduated top of my class from Wharton, double majoring in finance and economics. But to my family, I was still the little girl who needed guidance. When I joined Miller Financial at 24, my father put me under the supervision of my cousin Jake. Jake, who'd barely scraped by at a state college business program. "You need to understand how we do things in the real world," my father explained, patting my shoulder with a condescending smile. Jake's been here longer. Jake had been there exactly 7 months longer. Over the next 8 years, I became the firm's quiet powerhouse. My investment strategies consistently outperformed market averages by 7 to 9%, in an industry where 2% gains were celebrated. Clients started specifically asking for me, though my father always took the credit in board meetings for my team's performance. The family fund was separate from the business, a $12 million pool that family members contributed to for everything from new ventures to vacation homes. My own contribution had grown to $4.2 million over the years, nearly 35% of the total. What no one knew was that I'd also been building my own separate investment portfolio since college. While they summited in the Hamptons, I was meeting with startup founders. While they bought luxury cars, I was buying minority stakes in emerging tech companies. Last Thanksgiving, Uncle William toasted the Miller family, where we all pull our weight and share the rewards equally. Everyone cheered. Yet, my division had generated 62% of the company's profits that quarter. I smiled, raised my glass, and made a mental note: accelerate the exit strategy. Family meetings were a monthly ritual held in the mahogany-paneled conference room. I'd present detailed analyses and growth projections, only for Uncle Richard to interrupt with, "That's all very technical, but what does your father think?" My mother would pull me aside afterward, offering well-meaning but infantilizing advice. "Honey, men don't like women who sound too smart. You need to let your father and uncles feel important." And then there was Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, the one who gave the thumbs up. She'd never worked a day in the business, but she sat on the board, receiving the same profit share as those of us working 60-hour weeks. She had a talent for taking credit, especially for my ideas. Remember when Heather mentioned international markets? I've been thinking we should expand into Europe, she'd announce, 3 weeks after I presented a detailed European expansion plan that had been tabled. My cousin Amanda was the only one who seemed to see it. Over lunch one day, she confided, "They do the same thing to me, but wise, because I don't have your financial skills to make them money. They just want me to marry someone useful to the business." Despite all this, I remained loyal. I truly believed my contributions would eventually be recognized. So, I kept pouring my talent into growing their wealth, while quietly building my own safety net. By my 32nd birthday, my personal investments had quietly soared to $17 million, a fact I kept entirely to myself. I bought a beautiful brownstone in Back Bay under an LLC, renovated a home office with state-of-the-art tech, and hired a small, loyal team, separate from the family business, all under strict NDAs. I even secured patents for several financial algorithms I developed during my hobby time on weekends. I never flaunted my success. I drove a modest car, lived below my means, and showed up at Miller Financial every day, making money for people who didn't appreciate me. Some might call it strategic patience. Others, conflict avoidance. Either way, it was about to change. The quarterly planning meeting last month started like any other. The whole extended family gathered, my father at the head of the table. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation on a new investment strategy that could boost our high-net-worth clients' returns by 12%. As I handed out my reports, Jake strolled in, 15 minutes late, carrying only a coffee cup and his phone. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, not sounding sorry at all. "Just wrapping up a call with the Donovan account." The Donovan account was my client, but I'd asked Jake to sit in on a preliminary call while I finished these projections. My father beamed. "No problem, son. Client relationships always come first. Why don't you tell us how that's going before Heather starts with all her numbers?" Just like that, the first 20 minutes were dedicated to Jake taking credit for 6 months of my work. I sat quietly, watching family members nod approvingly as he misrepresented key aspects of my strategy. When it was finally my turn, I'd barely gotten through my second slide when Uncle Richard cleared his throat. "This all seems unnecessarily complicated," he said, not bothering to hide his dismissive tone. "Our clients trust the Miller name because we keep things simple and reliable." Aunt Patricia nodded vigorously. "Exactly. All these algorithms and technical strategies just confuse people." I took a deep breath. "Actually, our client surveys indicate they're specifically coming to us for more sophisticated approaches. The market has changed, and if we don't adapt, we'll lose accounts to firms embracing these new methodologies." My father tapped his pen on the table, a signal I'd learned meant he was getting impatient. "Heather, theory is one thing, but we deal in practical realities here." "This isn't theory," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "I've already implemented this approach with the Westfield portfolio as a test case. They've seen a 14% return in just 1 quarter. There was a moment of surprised silence. Then my father responded, "You implemented this without authorization? That's not how we do things here." Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I discussed it with you last month. You said to do whatever I thought best with the Westfield account, since it was underperforming." "I certainly didn't authorize a complete strategy overhaul," he snapped back, though we both knew he'd barely listened, distracted by a golf tournament on the office TV. Jake jumped in. "I have a simpler approach we could consider." He had nothing prepared. No slides, no data, not even a notepad. Yet for the next 30 minutes, the family listened attentively as he repackaged ideas I'd presented last year, missing the key components that would actually make them work. "Now, that's the kind of straightforward thinking clients expect from the Miller name," my father said proudly when Jake finished. "Let's develop Jake's approach for next quarter." After the meeting, I tried to speak with my father privately. "Dad, I'm concerned about the direction we're taking. The strategy Jake proposed has significant gaps that could expose clients to unnecessary risk." My father was checking sports scores on his phone. "Heather, you're too caught up in the details. This business was built on relationships and instinct, not just numbers and charts." But the numbers and charts are what keep us compliant with regulations and actually growing client wealth, I pointed out. He finally looked up. You know what your problem is? You've never trusted the family way of doing things. Always thinking your fancy degree makes you smarter than everyone else. I was stunned. That's not true. I've dedicated my entire career to this family business. And we appreciate that, sweetheart, he said, already looking back at his phone. But sometimes you need to remember that you're still learning how things work in the real world. I was 32, managing over $300 million in client assets, with a track record that had helped double the firm's value in 8 years. And I was still learning. As I left his office, I overheard Aunt Patricia talking to my uncle in the break room. Heather's presentations give me a headache, she was saying. All those charts and big words, like she's trying to make the rest of us feel stupid. My uncle agreed. The girl doesn't understand our culture. Never has. I quietly stepped away, a cold realization settling in my stomach. I went back to my office, closed the door, and sat in silence, processing what I'd just heard. For the first time, I allowed myself to accept what a part of me had always known. I would never be fully respected in my family business, no matter what I contributed. That evening, instead of our usual post-meeting dinner, I went home to my brownstone. I began reviewing my personal affairs. I confirmed all my independent business dealings were properly separated from family assets. I checked that my patents and intellectual property were securely in my name alone. I reviewed client contracts, confirming which relationships were legally tied to me personally. I wasn't planning anything specific yet, but something had shifted. I knew I needed to be prepared. The next week brought more subtle slights and dismissals. In a client meeting, my father interrupted my explanation of a tax strategy to translate it into English, oversimplifying my advice to the point of inaccuracy. At a staff training, Jake presented one of my risk assessment models as his own creation. My aunt accidentally left me off the email chain for an important family business discussion. Then came the final straw. I arrived early at the office one Tuesday to prepare for a meeting with our largest client, only to find the meeting had been moved up and was already in progress. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched my father, Jake, and 2 other family members sitting with clients I had worked with for years. I stood frozen in the hallway, watching as they showed presentation slides *I* had created. As the client nodded approvingly, my father and Jake exchanged congratulatory glances. Later that day, I discovered they had also scheduled a strategic planning retreat for the following weekend at my uncle's lake house. Everyone in the family leadership team was invited, except me. That night, I sat in my home office until late, staring at my computer, not really seeing it. Years of memories cycled through my mind. All the times my ideas had been dismissed, only to be celebrated when presented by someone else. All the extra hours I'd worked to prove my worth. All the growth I'd created for a family that would never see me as an equal. Enough, I whispered to the empty room. Whatever happened next, I was done being undervalued and overlooked. 3 days later, on Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A notification from our family WhatsApp group. My father had created it 2 years ago for business, though it mostly became a place for golf scores and vacation photos. The message from my father read, "After considerable discussion among the senior family members, we think it would be best if Heather steps away from client management for now. We appreciate her background work, but recent feedback suggests clients respond better to our traditional approach. This isn't permanent, just a chance to realign with the Miller way of doing things." I stayed at the screen, watching the responses trickle in. Uncle Richard, completely agree. Smart move. Aunt Patricia, a smug end on. Cousin Jake, happy to take over her accounts in the transition. My mother, we only want what's best for everyone. 2 other cousins added their own affirmative responses. No one objected. No one even asked what client feedback they were referring to, which was telling, since I managed our client satisfaction surveys and knew our numbers were excellent. I felt an odd sense of calm. After years of trying to prove my worth, after all the revenue I had generated, after all the growth I had created for them, this was what it came down to. A group text, removing me from my role, without even the courtesy of a call. I waited exactly 17 minutes before responding. During that time, several more supportive messages appeared, even from some who'd previously claimed to be on my side during office disagreements. Finally, I typed, "Understood. I'll respect that decision and step away from the family fund, too. Wishing everyone continued success." Short, professional, and containing a bombshell they didn't yet understand. I put my phone on silent, face down on my desk. Then, I opened my laptop and logged into the banking portal for our family fund. As a major contributor and one of the fund administrators, I had full access. The process was surprisingly simple. A few clicks initiated the withdrawal of my entire contribution, $4.2 million, plus the accurate portion of growth attributable to my investments within the fund, which added another $1.7 million. The system asked if I was sure. I was. Next, I sent a formal email to our family attorney, documenting my withdrawal, citing the section of our family agreement that allowed major contributors to exit with proper notice. I blind copied myself on a separate email account for my records. The family fund had always operated with a liquidity requirement, keeping at least 50% of assets in easily accessible accounts. This meant my withdrawal wouldn't bounce due to insufficient liquid assets, but it would immediately and dramatically alter the fund's structure and capacity. Our banking alerts were set to notify all administrators of any transaction over $50,000. I was counting on most family members enjoying their Friday evening, not checking those notifications until much later. With that done, I sent another email to my private team, informing them of upcoming changes and setting a meeting for Monday morning. Then, I went to my home safe and retrieved all the key documents I had carefully organized over the years, copies of patents, client contracts with my personal service clauses, documentation of my independent business entities, and evidence of which investment strategies were legally mine, not the firm's. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room, looking out at the Boston skyline as dusk settled over the city. A part of me felt a twinge of sadness at the bridge I was burning. These were, after all, the people I had grown up with, worked alongside, and tried to please my entire life. But a stronger part of me felt something else: liberation. The constant need to prove myself, to swallow slights, to watch less qualified people take credit for my work. It was over. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be the overlooked daughter trying to earn a seat at a table that had been designed to exclude me. My phone started buzzing around 7:03 p.m. I glanced at it once, seeing several WhatsApp notifications and texts from various family members. I didn't read them. Instead, I turned on a movie I'd been wanting to watch, ordered my favorite takeout, and gave myself permission to enjoy my Friday evening. At exactly 10:47 p.m., my phone rang with my father's specific ringtone. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, immediately, and again. On the fourth call, I turned my phone off completely. I slept surprisingly well that night. When I turned my phone back on at 7 a.m. Saturday morning, I had to wait several minutes for all the notifications to finish loading. 64 missed calls, 127 text messages, 43 WhatsApp messages, 17 voicemails. I made myself coffee before listening to any of them. The first voicemail, from 10:48 p.m., "Heather, it's Dad. Call me immediately about this fund transfer. There must be some mistake." The second, from 11:10 p.m., "Heather, this is completely unacceptable. Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way. Call me back now." The messages grew increasingly urgent through the night. By the 2:15 a.m. voicemail, my father's voice had lost its anger and held naked panic. "What happened? The bank has flagged everything. The fund is completely frozen due to suspicious activity. You need to call me back right now." The most recent one, from 6:30 a.m., was different. My father's voice was quieter, with a tone I'd rarely heard from him: uncertainty. "Heather, I don't understand what's happening. Whatever we did to upset you, this seems extreme. The entire family fund is locked down. The bank needs your verification to unfreeze the accounts since you initiated the transaction. Please call me back. Please." I finished my coffee, took a shower, and dressed in my favorite outfit, a well-tailored blue suit that always gave me confidence. Only then did I send a single text message to my father. I'm honoring your decision. You asked me to step away, and I have. I've withdrawn my personal contribution as allowed under Section 7.3 of the Family Fund Agreement. The bank freeze is standard procedure for large transactions and will resolve once they complete their verification process. I've already submitted my documentation to them. Within seconds, my phone rang. I declined the call. Then I sent one more text. I'll be available to discuss this on Monday at 9 a.m. at my home office. The address has been emailed to you. Then I turned off notifications and prepared to enjoy my weekend, knowing that across town, my family was just beginning to realize what I had done, and that it was only the start. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. What I didn't tell my family was that I had a friend at the bank. Not in any improper way, nothing that would violate banking regulations. But Sandra and I had gone to college together, and she now worked as a senior manager at the institution handling our family fund. She couldn't share specific information, but she did call me Saturday afternoon. Your family is creating quite a scene, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Your father has been on the phone with 3 different departments. Your uncle showed up in person and demanded to speak with the president of the bank. I'm sorry about that, I replied. Don't be, Sandra said. From what I can tell, everything you did was completely by the book. The freeze is just standard protocol when a significant percentage of a large fund is withdrawn suddenly. It's an anti-fraud measure. I know, I said, and I've already submitted all the documentation showing I'm entitled to those funds, which is why it should be resolved by Monday, she confirmed. Though I doubt that will calm them down in the meantime. She wasn't wrong. Through various notifications that kept appearing despite my efforts to mute them, I caught glimpses of the family meltdown. My phone would light up with preview snippets. Uncle Richard, this is sabotage. She can't just. Aunt Patricia, I always said she was too emotional to. Cousin Jake, what about the Henderson deal we were counting on? My mother, Heather, honey, please just talk to us. We can fix. By Saturday evening, the tone of the messages had begun to shift from outrage to desperation. The family had apparently begun to understand the full implications of my withdrawal. The Henderson deal Jake mentioned was a $20 million commercial real estate project the family had been planning to invest in. The fund would have provided the down payment, with financing covering the rest. Without my portion, they were now significantly short of the required cash, and the bank freeze meant they couldn't access even the remaining funds in time to save the deal. 6 months of work and a potential $3 million profit were evaporating. My cousin Amanda was the only one who sent a different kind of message. Good for you. They never appreciated what you brought to the table. Want to get coffee next week? I actually smiled at that one and sent back a simple yes. Saturday night brought a new wave of calls and messages. This time, it wasn't just family members. Clients had apparently begun to hear rumors and were concerned about their accounts. My father had given out my personal cell number, suggesting people contact me directly about the temporary technical issue with some accounts. This crossed a line, involving outside clients in a family dispute. I spent 2 hours sending carefully worded reassurances to clients, clarifying that their individual investment accounts were completely separate from the family fund and entirely unaffected. I also noted that I would be happy to discuss their portfolios directly on Monday if they had any concerns. I was careful not to disparage the family business or give any indication of the internal conflict. These were relationships I had built over years, and regardless of what was happening with my family, I maintained my professional ethics. Around midnight, our family attorney, Jonathan, called. Unlike the others, he was calm and measured. Heather, I've reviewed your withdrawal documentation, and everything appears to be in order legally. However, the timing and manner of this action have created significant challenges for the family operations. I understand that, I replied, but as you've confirmed, I've acted within my rights. He paused. Your father has asked me to propose an immediate restoration of the funds with a renegotiated leadership role for you within the company. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not making any decisions right now. I'm happy to discuss options on Monday morning. Another pause is also mentioned the possibility of legal action regarding intellectual property and client relationships. Now it was my turn to pause. This was a weak threat, and Jonathan knew it. All of my patents and proprietary strategies are registered in my name personally, not the company's. As for client relationships, I'm sure you've reviewed the contracts and noticed the personal service clauses in many of them. But again, I'm happy to discuss all of this on Monday. He sighed. I'll relay your position. For what it's worth, I've advised against any legal posturing. It wouldn't serve anyone's interests. I agree, I said. Good night, Jonathan. By Sunday morning, the family strategy had shifted again. Now came the emotional appeals. My mother left a tearful voicemail about family loyalty and how my grandfather would be disappointed. My Aunt Patricia, who had given the thumbs up to push me out, now sent a long message about how she had always admired my business acumen and felt we needed to support each other as women in finance. Uncle Richard tried a different approach, sending a gruff text, suggesting I was overreacting to standard business restructuring and needed to get over my hurt feelings for the good of the family. I prepared for Monday's meeting, meticulously organizing all my documentation and planning my talking points. I wasn't interested in revenge or drama. I simply wanted recognition of my value and respect for my contributions. Sunday night, my home security system alerted me to someone at my door. Through the camera, I saw my father standing there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His normally perfectly pressed shirt was wrinkled, and he seemed to have aged years in 2 days. I considered not answering, sticking to my Monday morning timeline, but something in his defeated posture moved me. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Heather, he said, his voice hoarse. The Henderson deal falls through tomorrow at 9 a.m. if we don't have the funds. It's $3 million down the drain. I looked at him steadily. That sounds like a business problem that needs a business solution. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm willing to help if we're talking business, not family emotions. 9 a.m. tomorrow, at my home office, as arranged. Bring whoever you want from the family leadership. He looked like he wanted to say more, to push for an immediate resolution, but something in my expression must have told him it would be useless. 9 a.m., he confirmed, then turned and walked back to his car. I closed the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. For perhaps the first time in my professional life, my father had come to me in need, rather than the other way around. Tomorrow would be a new kind of family meeting, one where I set the terms. I slept fitfully that night, waking several times to check the security system. Part of me worried that more family members might show up, but the house remained quiet. By 6 a.m., I was up and preparing. I set up my dining room as a conference space, with copies of relevant documents at each seat. I made coffee and arranged a tray of pastries, a professional touch that also gave me something normal to focus on. At 8:30, my security system alerted me again. They were early. Through the camera, I saw not just my father, but also Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Jake, and our attorney, Jonathan. The family had brought their full leadership contingent. Good. I was ready for all of them. At precisely 8:59, I opened my front door. My father stood at the front of the group, with the others arranged behind him like some sort of family business army. Their expressions ranged from my father's tense determination to Jake's poorly concealed hostility, to Aunt Patricia's sudden attempt at warmth. Come in, I said simply, stepping aside. They filed into my home, some of them looking around with obvious surprise at my tastefully appointed brownstone. I had never invited family to my personal space before, and I could see them reassessing things as they noted the original artwork and high-end furnishings. The dining room is set up for our meeting, I directed, leading them through the hallway. They took seats around my table. I remained standing at the head, a position my father typically occupied in family meetings. He noticed this immediately but said nothing as he took a chair to my right. Coffee, I offered, maintaining a professional demeanor. A few mumbled acceptances, and I calmly poured cups before taking my place at the head of the table. The silence stretched for a moment before my father cleared his throat. Heather, we're here to resolve this situation quickly. The Henderson deal. I raised my hand, cutting him off, a gesture he had used countless times on me. Before we discuss any specific deals, we need to address the larger situation. I've withdrawn my contribution from the family fund, as is my right. The bank has confirmed the transaction is proper, and the freeze should be lifted by noon today. This is ridiculous. Uncle Richard burst out. You're holding the family hostage over what? A bruised ego? Because we suggested you take a different role. I turned to him with a calm I didn't entirely feel. This isn't about ego, Uncle Richard. This is about value and respect. For 8 years, I've generated consistent returns above market average. My division has brought in 62% of company profits. My client satisfaction ratings are the highest in the firm. Yet, I was removed from client management via group text, without discussion, based on claimed feedback that doesn't exist. We were going to discuss it in detail at the retreat. Aunt Patricia interjected, her voice honey-sweet. We just wanted to get the basic decision communicated first. The retreat I wasn't invited to, I pointed out. That was an oversight, my father said quickly. Jake snorted. Come on, Heather. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. So you got your feelings hurt. Did you have to blow up a major deal over it? I turned to Jake, maintaining my composure. I didn't blow up anything. I simply withdrew my personal contribution, which happened to be a larger percentage than anyone anticipated. That reveals the real problem here. You've all been taking my contribution for granted, both financially and professionally. My father leaned forward. Whatever mistakes we've made, and I admit there may have been some, this response is disproportionate. You've put a $3 million deal in jeopardy. A deal that apparently couldn't happen without my money, yet I wasn't consulted on, I noted. Jonathan, our attorney, spoke up for the first time. Perhaps we could focus on immediate solutions first, then address the longer-term concerns afterward. The Henderson deadline is the most time-sensitive issue. I nodded. That's reasonable. I'm prepared to wire $5 million to the family fund this morning, sufficient to cover the Henderson down payment with a buffer. Everyone started talking at once, relief evident in their voices, until I raised my hand again. But this will be structured as a loan from my personal holdings to the family fund, with standard market interest rates and specific repayment terms. Jonathan can draw up the paperwork immediately. The relief around the table faltered. Alone, my father asked, You're going to charge your own family interest? This is a business transaction, I replied evenly, which is how you've always insisted we approach things at Miller Financial. I'm offering market rate financing on extremely short notice to save a valuable deal. Any other lender would charge significantly higher rates given the time constraints. Jonathan nodded reluctantly. She's right. It's actually quite a reasonable offer under the circumstances. My uncle's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is extortion. No, I corrected. This is negotiation. The alternative is to let the Henderson deal fall through, which serves no one's interests. My father studied me for a long moment. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing pride against practicality, emotion against business. Fine, he finally said. Jonathan, draw up the loan agreement. But Heather, after this, we expect you to return to your role at the company and reinvest in the family fund. We can discuss a more appropriate leadership position for you. I shook my head. That's not on the table today. The loan for the Henderson deal is a separate matter. My future involvement with Miller Financial and the family fund will require a completely new agreement. Aunt Patricia leaned toward me, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a sympathetic tone. Heather, I understand you're upset. We all say and do things in the heat of the moment, but we're family. Yes, we are, I agreed. And families should treat each other with respect. The group message asking me to step away made it clear how much my contributions are valued. That was poorly handled, my father admitted. I take responsibility for that. But surely we can move past a single communication mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I said quietly. It was a symptom of a pattern that's existed for years. My ideas are dismissed until someone else presents them. My achievements are attributed to team effort, while others are celebrated individually. My professional judgment is questioned despite consistent results. I looked around the table. I've poured my talent and profit into this family, and in return, I've been treated as an afterthought. That ends today. The room fell silent as the full impact of my words sank in. For the first time, I wasn't backing down or smoothing things over. I wasn't accepting a pat on the head and a promise to do better next time. Finally, Jake broke the silence with a dismissive laugh. This is all very dramatic, but let's be realistic. You need the Miller name and connections as much as we need your number crunching. Where exactly do you think you're going to go? That was the opening I had been waiting for. I smiled at Jake's question. That brings us to the next item on our agenda. I pressed a button on a small remote, and the large television on the dining room wall lit up with a presentation. The first slide showed a logo I had designed myself, Heather Miller Capital Management. I've been operating my own investment firm as a separate entity for the past 4 years, I explained, advancing to the next slide, which showed impressive growth charts. My personal clients have enjoyed average returns of 17% compared to the 9% at Miller Financial. The shocked expressions around the table gave me a satisfaction I tried not to show. That's not possible, my father said. You've been working full-time at our firm. When would you have had time to run another business? Evenings, weekends, the vacation days I never took, I replied. While everyone else was at the lake house or on European trips, I was building something of my own. Uncle Richard's face had moved from red to nearly purple. This is a violation of your employment contract. You can't compete with the family business. I slid a document across the table to Jonathan. My employment contract specifically allows for personal investment activities as long as they don't directly solicit Miller Financial clients. I've adhered to that completely. Jonathan skimmed the document and gave a reluctant nod. She's technically correct. The clause was intended to cover personal stock trading, but it's broadly worded. I advanced to the next slide, showing a list of patents. I also hold 7 patents for financial algorithms and trading systems, all registered to me personally, not Miller Financial. Those were developed while you worked for us, my father argued, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. They were developed on my own time, using my own resources, I corrected. I've maintained meticulous documentation to establish that the patents are legally mine. The next slide showed a client list, a modest but impressive collection of names, none of whom were current Miller Financial clients. I've built relationships with 27 high-net-worth clients, completely separate from our family business, I continued. Their combined assets under my management total just over $400 million. Jake let out a low whistle despite himself. Furthermore, I said, moving to another slide, 17 current Miller Financial clients have personal service agreements with me specifically. I handed copies of these contracts to Jonathan. These agreements include clauses stating that if I leave the firm, they have the option to transfer their accounts to follow me. Jonathan reviewed the documents with growing concern. These are standard personal service provisions. Many high-end clients insist on them to ensure continuity with their preferred advisor. My father looked stricken. How many of our clients have these agreements? Clients representing approximately $230 million in assets, I replied evenly. The room fell silent again as everyone processed the implications. Not only had I built a successful separate business, but I could potentially take a significant portion of Miller Financial's client base with me if I left. When did you plan all this? My aunt asked, her false warmth completely gone now. I didn't plan it as a strategy against the family, I said honestly. I started building my separate business because I realized years ago that no matter what I contributed, I would never be fully respected at Miller Financial. It was self-preservation, not sabotage. I advanced to one final slide, showing a comparison between Miller Financial's performance and my own firm's results over the past 4 years. The difference was stark. I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone, I said, softening my tone slightly. I'm sharing it to demonstrate that I've earned the right to be taken seriously. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the recognition my results deserve. My father stayed at the screen, then back at me. For the first time in my professional life, I saw something new in his eyes, respect, tinged with regret. "What do you want, Heather?" he asked quietly. "First, we complete the loan agreement for the Henderson deal to address the immediate need," I replied. "Second, I take a 1-month leave of absence from Miller Financial to give everyone time to consider next steps. Third, we reconvene in 30 days to discuss either my return under new terms or my formal departure and the transition of my clients." I looked around the table. "Those are my non-negotiable terms." Jonathan spoke up. "From a legal perspective, these are reasonable requests given the circumstances. I would advise accepting them." Uncle Richard looked like he wanted to argue further, but my father raised a hand to silence him. A gesture I had seen countless times in family meetings, but never directed at one of them. "Jonathan will draw up the loan agreement immediately and will formalize your leave of absence today." Jake started to protest, but my father cut him off. "Enough, Jake. The situation has changed, and we need to adapt." As Jonathan began drafting the loan document on his laptop, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. I could see various family members processing the new reality, a reality where I held significant power they hadn't known existed. Aunt Patricia, ever the political weather vane, was the first to adjust her approach. "Heather, I've always said you were the most talented financial mind in the family. I look forward to seeing what role you might take when you return." The insincerity was almost comical, but I simply nodded politely. Within an hour, the loan agreement was finalized. I signed the document, and the transfer was initiated immediately. The Henderson deal would proceed, saving the family from an embarrassing and costly failure. As everyone prepared to leave, my father lingered behind. When we were alone, he looked around my home with new eyes, taking the success I had built independently. I underestimated you," he said finally. "I've been doing it your entire life, haven't I?" I didn't answer directly. "The family meeting in 30 days will be an opportunity for a fresh start, one way or another." He nodded, looking suddenly older and very tired. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, even if I haven't shown it." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. "But I needed that recognition years ago, not after I forced your hand." He nodded again, accepting the truth of my words, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Your grandfather would have been impressed. He valued results and determination above everything else." After everyone left, I sat alone in my dining room, looking at the remnants of the meeting, coffee cups, scattered papers, the lingering tension in the air. For years, I had imagined a confrontation where I finally stood up for myself. But the reality had been both more clinical and more emotional than I had anticipated. I wasn't naive enough to think one meeting had solved everything. The next 30 days would be a critical period of adjustment for everyone, myself included. But for the first time in my professional life, I had negotiated from a position of strength, rather than hoping for recognition that never came. Whatever happened next, the dynamics had been permanently altered. I had finally claimed my own value, and no one, not even my father, could dismiss it any longer. The 30 days of my leave passed more quickly than I expected. I focused on my independent business, working with my small team to prepare for any outcome of the upcoming family meeting. If we needed to absorb transferred clients from Miller Financial, we had systems in place. If we were to create some new hybrid arrangement with the family business, we had proposals ready. I also took time for myself, hiking in the White Mountains on weekends, having dinners with non-family friends, and even dating a bit, something I had neglected while building my parallel career. There was a lightness to my days that had been missing for years. The weight of constantly seeking approval lifted from my shoulders. My cousin Amanda and I met for coffee several times. Away from the family dynamics, she shared her own frustrations and aspirations. She had an architectural degree she'd never been allowed to use, as the family had pushed her into the marketing department at Miller Financial. "Watching you stand up to them gave me courage," she told me. "I've started interviewing with design firms. I haven't told anyone else yet. They'll try to talk you out of it," I warned. She smiled. "I know, but I've seen what's possible now." I received occasional updates from Jonathan about the family business. The loan had saved the Henderson deal, which was proceeding smoothly. My father had implemented some of my proposed strategies with positive early results. Several family members had been making overtures through Jonathan, testing the waters for the upcoming meeting. When the day finally arrived, I chose a neutral location, a private room at an upscale Boston restaurant, rather than either my home or the family offices. I arrived early to ensure the setup was as I wanted, a round table rather than a rectangular one, eliminating the head position my father traditionally occupied. They arrived as a group again, but the energy was different. Gone was the confrontational stance from our last meeting. My father led with a subdued confidence. Uncle Richard seemed resigned rather than angry, and Aunt Patricia had abandoned her false warmth for careful neutrality. Jake looked uncomfortable but controlled, and Jonathan maintained his professional demeanor. Two new additions surprised me: my mother, who rarely attended business meetings, and my cousin Amanda. After everyone was seated and pleasantries exchanged, my father opened the discussion. "Heather, over the past month, we've had time to consider the situation carefully. The family and the business have benefited from your contributions in ways we failed to fully recognize. We would like to propose a new arrangement that we believe acknowledges your value while preserving the family legacy we all care about." He nodded to Jonathan, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. "We're proposing a restructuring of Miller Financial," my father continued. "The creation of a new division, Miller Capital Management, with you as president and CEO. This division would have autonomy over investment strategies and client relationships, with its own profit-sharing structure, separate from the traditional family pool." I opened the folder and reviewed the proposal as he spoke. The terms were surprisingly favorable: a significant ownership stake, decision-making authority, and compensation tied directly to performance. Additionally, my father said, "We're proposing changes to the family fund structure. Each contributor would have proportional voting rights based on their investment, rather than the current system where all family members have equal say regardless of contribution." This was a major concession, a direct acknowledgement of the power imbalance that had existed. "What about my existing independent business?" I asked. "We're proposing a merger," Jonathan explained. "Your clients and patents would be incorporated into the new division, with specific protections for your intellectual property rights. All client service agreements would remain intact, with you as the primary advisor." I considered the proposal carefully. "What about leadership succession? The same issues could arise again in the future." My father nodded. "The restructuring includes a merit-based succession plan for all divisions. Leadership positions will be determined by performance metrics and client outcomes, not seniority or family politics." It was a comprehensive proposal, addressing most of my concerns. The family had clearly done serious work during my absence. "I'll need time to review the details," I said. "Of course," my father agreed. "We're not expecting an immediate decision." Uncle Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "I want to acknowledge something, Heather. I've been dismissive of your approaches because they weren't how we've traditionally done things. The results speak for themselves, and I was wrong to resist change that clearly benefits our clients." Coming from my uncle, this was the equivalent of moving mountains. Aunt Patricia added, "The family business needs to evolve. Your generation brings perspectives we need to embrace, not resist." Jake shifted uncomfortably before adding, "I've learned a lot reviewing your client strategies over the past month. There's a depth to your approach that I hadn't fully appreciated." These admissions, while clearly difficult for them, showed a significant shift in the family dynamic. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly, a simple gesture of support that meant more than she probably realized. "I appreciate everyone's willingness to reconsider our working relationship," I said carefully. "I'll review the proposal and respond within a week." As the meeting concluded, Amanda caught my eye with a small smile of encouragement. Whatever I decided, I knew I had at least one family member who understood what this moment meant. The days that followed involved careful analysis of the proposal with my team and independent legal counsel. There were negotiations on specific terms, clarifications of authority boundaries, and detailed discussions about the integration of my existing business. In the end, I accepted a modified version of the family's proposal. The new division was established, my independent business was merged in, and I took on a leadership role that reflected my contributions. My personal investments returned to the family fund, but under the new voting structure that ensured my voice would be proportional to my contribution. The transition wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced, my father instinctively trying to override decisions, Jake taking credit in client meetings, Patricia making subtle undermining comments. But now there were structures in place to address these issues. And more importantly, I had proven my willingness to walk away if necessary. Over the following year, Miller Capital Management outperformed every other division of the family business. New clients were attracted by our innovative approaches, and existing clients benefited from enhanced returns. My cousin Amanda eventually left to pursue her architectural passion, with my full support and a small investment from me in her new design firm. The family dynamic shifted gradually. My father and I developed a new relationship based on mutual professional respect, rather than the parent-child dynamic that had undermined us for years. Some family members adapted better than others, but all recognized that the business was stronger for the changes we had implemented. One evening, nearly a year after the group text, my father looked at me in my new office, reviewing quarterly results. "I've been thinking about your grandfather lately," he said unexpectedly. When he handed the business to me, he said something I didn't understand at the time. He said, "The best legacy isn't preservation, it's evolution." I think I finally understand what he meant. I looked at my father thoughtfully. Evolution is harder than preservation. It requires admitting that the original form might not be perfect. He nodded. Pride makes that difficult. I was so focused on maintaining what he built that I resisted changes that would have made it better. He smiled slightly, even when those changes came from the person most committed to its success. "It's never too late to evolve," I said. The journey from being undervalued to being respected hadn't come easily. It had required me to build leverage, to be willing to walk away, and ultimately, to force a confrontation I would have preferred to avoid. But the outcome wasn't just better for me. It was better for the entire family and the business we had all dedicated ourselves to. The most valuable lesson wasn't about finance or business strategy. It was simpler and more universal. Respect isn't given freely. It must sometimes be claimed. Worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it, but by your own knowledge of your value and your willingness to stand firm in that knowledge. Have you ever had to take a dramatic stand to make people recognize your value? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.